We do have quorum, so Vice Chair Kylie, if you would like to start us off.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Clerk, and hello, committee members. Hello, members of the public. I also want to acknowledge that I think we have at least one visiting counselor tonight, so welcome to them as well. We will kick things off, call this meeting to order, but first we have a public meeting. So what I'll do is read the notice of collection, and essentially that outlines the way in which Planning Committee conducts itself and gives some of the technicalities around how public participation works and what that means for these files going forward. So, notice of collection. Personal information collected as a result of this public hearing and process is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making decisions on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services. The purpose of this public meeting is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. The meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their names and addresses for recording in the minutes. Interested members of the public can email the committee clerk, who we have Ms. Fawcett with us tonight, just spoke, or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. The public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An exception to this rule is combined reports, which consolidates the public meeting and comprehensive reports. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to Planning Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared, making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. The committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the applications from the city's perspective. Following a council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to make the appeal of the decision to the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision.
Sorry for my panic moment.
And I see our chair has arrived. I'll just continue and quickly editorialize on what I just read for those members of the public who are here. It's essentially encouraging you to participate if you would like to follow this file going forward. And if you don't want to participate tonight, but you're interested, you can write officially into the city to have standing at the LPAT should that ever be necessary. So the first, oh, there's Councillor Neal. I'll surrender the chair to you. We're just about to jump into the public.
Very much. I was having a panicked moment. I thought I had lost my my connection, but thanks to IT, I'm back on. So, did you read out the public statement?
Yeah, we just did the notice of collection.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Tonight we have one public meeting and one comprehensive meeting under the regular agenda. And just a heads up to committee members, we now have 4 or 5 late arriving letters concerning the public meeting application that have been submitted, and they're in our addendum. If you didn't have a chance to take a quick look, you may want to. So we'll begin with our first and only public meeting for 585 Union Street. So whoever the presenter is, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Mike Keane from FOTEN. Just do a sound check first. I think that was an okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Keane. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, members of Planning Committee, members of public and staff that are present this evening. My name is Mike Keane, and I'm a land use planner with FOTEN Consultants. And I'm here on behalf of the owners of 585 Union Street to present a zoning bylaw amendment to the committee this evening. This property will also be subject to a site plan control application as well. Next slide, please. This is just a quick context slide, and this is showing an image of the city, an aerial view with a bunch of labels on it showing the site's proximity roughly in the center of the image. And on this image, you can see that the building is located within the Portsmouth neighborhood. And it's a wonderful neighborhood that includes a mix of residential uses, institutional uses, wonderful park space, and commercial space as well. Buildings in the immediate vicinity of this site range from 1 to 2.5 stories, as is common in much of the old city. It's a site that's got great proximity to transit, the waterfront of the city, and other trails. Next slide, please. Now, this is just zooming in on the property a little closer. It's very close to the intersection of Union and Yonge Street. It's on the north side of Union Street. It's a very large property at 847 square meters, and it has a fairly wide frontage of over 16 meters. It's immediately adjacent to bus routes, and it's surrounded by residential uses. There is a small body shop on Yonge Street and abutting at the rear of the property as well. Next slide, please. Within the official plan, the property is designated residential, and the residential designation covers off all residential uses within the city. And it provides, the official plan provides a series of tests for verifying residential uses within that designation. So a series of tests related to compatibility. So this proposal is one that would conform to the official plan designation of residential. Next slide, please. The local area is zoned A5. Which is a zone that allows 1 and 2 family dwellings. And there are a few spot zones in the immediate area as well. Next slide, please. This is a site plan of the site on the screen at this time. And what this is showing is the intent of the application. And the desire is to add an addition at the rear of the property that would contain 2 additional residential units. It's an interesting property. It has a lot of opportunity to provide for amenity space, which I'll get into when I show you some of the renderings. It provides enough space for parking, for bicycle parking, and you can see it's an addition to the rear of the existing building. Next slide, please. So the design of this building and the renovations have been prepared by Rod Stokes, who's a local designer in Kingston. And my client had a family member render the site, which I know is very helpful for the committee and members of the public to view this. So we have a series of renderings that I'll be able to show you now. You can tell that right now, this is pretty much what the front of the property looks like today. If you've been by, if you've looked on Google Street View, you would have seen white Adirondack chairs instead of the red chairs that are in this photo. Next slide, please. This is a picture looking at the side of the building of the addition, and you can see the covered bike storage as well. So this is abutting the view that would abut the driveway on the west side of the property. This is the the rear of the property, the new 2-story addition. Next slide, please. This is a view of the very rear of the addition. So you're looking from the parking lot back south on the property. You're looking at the rear addition with the original house kind of slightly behind that. Next slide, please. This is looking at the rear patio on the front of the house that exists today that would be available to tenants of the building. Next slide, please. This is now turning around and looking back, showing that beyond where the vehicles would park, there's also further green space available for the residents of the proposal. Next slide, please. I'm going to quickly go through some of these floor plans because they might be hard for the public to see. Right now, the owner of the property lives in the house. And when his family first purchased it, the building had 3 units, but the one unit was very tiny. So largely it's been classified as a 2-unit building. So what you're seeing is the main floor of the existing house with the wooden deck, and you can see that there was an existing bachelor pad at the back of the first floor. What you see on the right side of the picture is the proposal to change that back to a master bedroom, just part of the main floor. So the main unit will be a 3-bedroom unit. Next slide, please. This is showing the second floor, and you can see that right now you access this from the front of the building. There's a stairwell that you walk up to access this unit. There's nobody in that unit because currently the owner is using the entire house. And you can see in the right side, the plan is to add an addition over where it's currently like a 1-story roof. And this would be a 2-bedroom unit. Next slide, please. These images are showing the addition that is proposed at the back of the house, and they are both 2-bedroom units. They model each other, both the upper and the lower floor. Next slide, please. So what's before the committee this evening is a zoning bylaw amendment to address the fact that we would need to allow 4 units in this zone. There is a request to reduce the minimum front yard, and that's because of the existing. So the A5 zone requires a 7.5 meter setback, but the existing house is already 4.5 meters. So that's a recognition of what's there. We're seeking to reduce the minimum side yard. That is again the recognition of the existing house, which comes within 0.9 meters on the east side of the property. The requirement is 1.2 meters. The addition itself will be 2.3 meters away. So there's no relief necessary for the addition that is being proposed from a side yard setback perspective, nor is there any requirements to increase height. Height in this zone is allowed to be over 10 meters. And this building will be less than 10 meters. Essentially, it's to match the neighborhood. It keeps the additions below the roof line of the front of the house. This zone also has a minimum lot area requirement, so it's based on a per unit requirement. And so that needs to be reduced. As this committee would know, there's many zones in the city that require 1 parking space per unit, and there are a few that require 1.4 spaces per unit. And we're seeking to provide 1 space per unit, and this is one of those zones that requires 1.4. There's also parking area requirements, and those are separate from driveway parking requirements. So we would need to increase that to accommodate 4 cars rather than 2. And we would also need to permit the single lane entrance. The note about aggregate amenity I want to speak to briefly. This is to do with the fact that when you have shared amenity spaces, they are required to be greater than 54 square meters. This property overall is providing more than 100 square meters of amenity space, but the shared deck is less than 54 square meters. So there's aspects of amenity that we need to reduce, but it's not overall. Overall, there's a front yard, a backyard, a deck, a patio. There's all kinds of wonderful amenity being proposed. Next slide, please. So this is my summary slide, and I do have a few slides following the presentation that may be of assistance during questions. So I would just like to summarize that as a land use planner, I find that this project is consistent with provincial policy, that it conforms to the official plan tests. It's been designed very carefully to respect the neighborhood and the character by tucking everything behind that existing dwelling. And it's proposed to maintain that current streetscape. That's a very important test when we're dealing with stable neighborhoods. And it's in good proximity to a variety of city uses, such as transit, parks, and trails. And I believe it's a good intensification project for this location. I'm pleased to assist with any questions. Thank you.
I'm talking without sound. I'll turn to our city planner to make comment. Hello, Waleed.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair, and through you, Mr. Chair. I would like to mention that notification for this public meeting was completed in accordance to the requirements of the Planning Act. We received several comments and they were attached as addendum to this meeting. The comments that were attached, as well as any future comments, will be addressed in the future comprehensive report, for which we don't have a date yet. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to the committee for any questions or questions now. If there are comments, we can do those at the second go round. So who would like to speak to this? Yes, Councillor Osanek.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just have one question, really. So yeah, when you look at it on Google Earth, there is like a bush or some type of tree on the front yard right now, but the concept site plan that you showed us on the front yard had nothing. I just wondered if there is room on the front yard when this is done to plant a tree, or if that tree's still there, if it could just be trimmed up and still be incorporated. And the backyard, because you're putting on that that big addition on the backyard, are there trees in the backyard, or what's the plan for trees when the addition's been done? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Keane. Oh, yeah. Yes, you can respond to that.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just figuring out the new process with turning the video on. There's lots of
I'm still figuring it out.
I apologize. So through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Osanek, I'm not sure the bush on the front still exists. We are submitting our site plan concurrently with this application. And Scott Wentworth Landscaping has done both a landscape plan and a tree inventory of the site, and has actually gone above and beyond the usual of covering off all the trees and bushes that are on the site. And there is only one tree slated for removal, which is close to the addition that's proposed. It's a Manitoba maple that is in poor condition. And there's also a cedar hedge at the back where the parking's proposed that's also in poor condition. But the rest of the trees that are all largely on the property line are all being maintained. And there are additional plantings proposed as well. So I don't think there's a bush on the front lawn anymore. There are lawn areas that we do hope to use as some of the amenity for the user, for the future residents of this building, though.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So when you say that there's going to be plantings, does that mean like it's going to be a tree or two, or does that just mean it's going to be more bushes and plants?
I think I'm still, yeah, I'm still unmuted. I have actually included the landscape plan in my presentation if the clerks could put it back up. And it is slide 18. And then we can just look at this and I can kind of animate it for you. So this plan, through you again, Mr. Chair, this plan is showing the combination of plantings and existing trees on the site. You can see largely they're on the perimeters of the site. That helps with privacy with the neighbors as the development grows. The tree that is being removed is on the top side of this image, and there's basically a circle close to the addition at the back. There would have been 4 circles there. One of those is going away where the Manitoba maple is in poor condition. But you can see that also on the side of the property, the north side of this picture, the top of this picture is the east side of the property. And that's basically an area that would just be green space. It's not really being counted as amenity space. It's a bioswale and it'll have plantings to deal with any stormwater requirements for the site. So the site is really oriented toward the driveway in terms of both the hard surfaces and the plantings. You can see the back patio has plantings, and all of that would just help with any cars coming and going from the site in terms of light reflecting, both in and around on the properties as well. I hope that assists.
Mhm. Thank you. So for the front yard, you don't think there's enough room to put a tree? That's my last question.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I would say just like as a non-arborist, it certainly looks like there's enough room. There's lots of pipes and other things going on. So what I'll do, Councillor Osanik, is I'll commit to speaking to my client and to our technical team and ask if a tree could be added to the front of this property, because we're still early stages, and those are large front lawns. They're about 4.5 meters deep. So as long as there's not a whole lot of pipes in there, I see no reason why a tree couldn't be something that's proposed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the committee with a question? Seeing none, gone. We will now open it up to members of the public. If there are any members that would wish to speak or ask questions, now would be the time.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to remind members of the public again to please use the raise hand function so that we can tell that you would like to speak at this time. And I'm not seeing any.
Okay, and if you could just quickly explain how to go about that for any novice.
Of course. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a participants button. Once you click on that, it will open a list to the side of your screen. At the bottom of the list of participants is the raise hand function. It looks like we do have one speaker who would like to address the committee. This is David Stone.
Great. If you could start them up, the floor is yours. So David Stone, it looks like your mute is turned off. Are you muted at your computer?
Mr. Chair, it looks like there is some difficulty with hearing him.
Could you give him the phone-in number?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair.
That would be great. And we'll come back to you and recognize you shortly. And if there aren't any other members of the we'll give Elizabeth a minute or two to try to get David online. So Rob, you'll be back in the classroom shortly, I guess. Yeah, I can imagine teaching
Looking
on
forward
Zoom.
to it.
Yeah,
I'm on the screen about 12 hours a day, so it'll be a welcome break from that, and just good to see the kids in person.
yeah. Is it in the new school?
Oh, I didn't tell you. I got transferred to Napanee.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So-
a nice school.
Yeah, oh, it's really lovely. Great admin, great staff, good size. Yeah, no complaints.
Yeah.
So I'm pulling a Jim Neal. I'm commuting from another municipality after work to quickly get to council things. Didn't used to do that from GAN.
Yeah, Gan and Elgin before that.
Yeah.
What grade, Rob, are you teaching?
I have a grade 12 this octmester. It's grade 12 world history. Then next octmester, I'm doing prep coverage. So when teachers take their prep, I just go around and help cover them. And then after that, I have a grade 9 geography. And then I have to find out what I get for Octo 8. So hopefully I get a position then too. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I have emailed Mr. Stone. I'm just going to let Mr. Stone know that if he could just quickly check his email, the numbers are there for you to call in.
Okay. So, Mr. Stone, if you check your email, there's a phone number you can call in with. In a minute or two, I think we'll go back into committee and we'll strongly suggest to Mr. Stone that he email in any questions he has. That'll give him standing with the tribunal. So does that work for you, Elizabeth?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that Mr. Stone has provided some correspondence for tonight as well.
Okay,
So
good.
I think we can proceed in that manner.
That's great. Thank you very much. So I'll go back into the committee. Are there any further questions or quick comments you'd like to make on the file? Yes, Councillor Kiley and then Councillor Hutchison.
Really quickly, just a comment. I think this is a great example of infill. Nice and scaled to the neighborhood, adding new units, using land that's already there. So I'm happy to put my support upon it unless there's something that comes up in comprehensive report that's not great, but it looks good to me.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. The first one is the proposal suggests bike storage on the outside there, and it doesn't seem to even cover the bikes. And I'm wondering if that can be something can be done about that because it doesn't seem very adequate.
Yes, Mr. King.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The intent of that bike storage, the rendering maybe doesn't show it as well as it does. I think I understand what you mean. It looks like the roof is a little short on our rendering. Our intent is absolutely to ensure that those bikes are covered and protected.
Do you display any possibility there for locking mechanisms or bars?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things I meant to mention earlier as well is this site doesn't have a basement under it. So that's a big reason why our bike storage is under a shed, basically protected bike cover. We're showing the roof right now. Maybe we can show a full shed instead. There's room for us to add those extra details. The basement that exists under the main part of the house is only 5 feet tall, and that's where all the mechanical is. So we don't really have like a in-building solution here. So that's why we're proposing the covered outdoor storage.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. My other question has got more to do with the, since we didn't hear from the public, but we know their concern. So, and that is that there's some concern, and this happens regularly in downtown neighborhoods, that you know, proposals like this undermine the single and double family zoning, and therefore lead to the undermining of stable neighborhoods. For that reason, why should we approve this?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, that's my primary job when I'm working for an owner of a property like this, is to assess the stable neighborhood policies and to assess the compatibility policies. So when working with the designer and when working with the owner of this property in coming up with this design, there was a lot of effort spent on compatibility. You know, like for example, a side yard setback of 1.2 meters has been doubled to 2.4 almost. So doubling of setbacks. It's a 2-story build, so you don't have overlook. There's not even the extra half a story. So the challenge is that you face each and every one of these applications is that you're dealing with a zoning bylaw and amendments to that bylaw from a bylaw that's older than I am, and you know, I'm not as young as I used to be. So you're dealing with an official plan that does recognize, even in stable neighborhoods, that the city wants to see appropriate intensification. And in this case, coming up with very attractive units that are attractive to a variety of tenants. They have nice open dining, kitchen, living areas. They're 2-bedroom units other than the main one, which is 3. They're designed in a way that should provide a number of people some rental options to consider this. So I think it is supportive of the official plan, and that's why you're able to consider a zoning amendment for these types of applications.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm just putting this on the table for staff and on behalf of the public.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So
Could you take
I
the
appreciate the
chair briefly,
reply.
Vice Chair Carlos?
And I recognize you, Councillor Neal. Go for it.
Okay, I appreciate Councillor Hutchison's first question. He and I both represent districts in the core of the city, and I sadly have to say Kingston may be the bike theft capital of Canada, which is really, really disturbing. So if there's any way that you can redesign, repurpose that shed so that it's a fully secured bike shed, I think that would be really, really good. And the only other thing is, like Councillor Asanek, she's our prime tree hugger on this committee, but she's not the only tree hugger. And it would be really, really nice, I think, on the streetscape, if there was a red maple on that front lawn it would really, really spruce up the streetscape, I think. So a consideration of that would be really, really good. And I agree with Councillor Kiley. It's a good design for a very substantially sized lot. It's actually an oversized lot for a 1 or 2 unit house. So it has potential for redevelopment, I believe. So thank you.
Well, to you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the committee, I will absolutely pass those recommendations on. I think they're very accommodatable. As a cyclist myself, I can tell you that my bikes live in the house. They don't go in outdoor storage. So I also appreciate the need for very secure storage. And that's a very easy fix for us to do to make a secure building to accommodate the bike.
That's great. Thank you
And
very
yield the
much.
chair to you.
We can add the tree. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, did you have anything?
Mr. Chair, I was able to contact Mr. Stone, and we do have him here at the moment on the line, if it's permitted by the committee to allow him to speak.
It's a little out of joint, but I'm okay with that. I don't see any objections from the committee. So please put him on.
So, Mr. Stone, I'm just going to ask you to press *6 in order to unmute yourself.
There you are. I believe you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can. There's a bit of a whistle, but go ahead.
Okay. All right, this is going to be difficult because I'm getting an echo.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I can just recommend that Mr. Stone turn down the video in the background. He's listening to the meeting at the same time.
Okay.
You can just close it down.
So yeah, if you close down your video, we should be able to hear you more clearly. Yes, point of order, Councillor Kiley.
Councillor Neal, also yourself and Councillor Hutchison are
Hello, can you hear me?
unmuted, so it's going to reverberate through your speakers as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, that sounds good, Mr. Stone.
All right. So is everyone there?
Yes, we can all hear you. If you could please say your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
Okay, my name is David Stone. My address is 1863 Sydenham Road. I own the property adjacent to 585 Union. And my concern is the 2-story built addition on the back of this property is going to be, I haven't seen any drawing or images or like rendering images of the impact of the back of this building on from the 581 view perspective. Does that make sense?
It does. And if you could ask all of your questions, then they'll be answered by Mr. Keene or by our planner. Okay, so all the questions go together, all the answers go together. Thank you.
What else would you?
Okay. Yeah, it's Catherine Stone, David's wife. I have a concern. This is such a charming neighborhood, and right now the mix is probably 50-50 with mostly houses on the north side are rentals and a proportion of them are students. The south side is predominantly single-family homes. And I have a fear that there are so many large lots in this neighborhood that it would be the tip of the iceberg, that unlike putting a carriage house at the back of the lot, which is quite common in these older districts, by running this large addition to the property, it is going to prompt everybody else to do the same thing. And I would hate to see it turn into a student ghetto like so many other areas south of Johnson Street. I know they were trying to designate the neighborhood at one point, and that is my greatest fear, that this will kick off everybody taking their lots and infilling. So I appreciate what Councillor Hutchison said. That is the mix I would be afraid of falling apart on the main street.
If I could just very quickly speak to that, the Planning Act is very, very explicit, and our staff can correct any of these comments if I'm misspeaking. But we are not allowed to zone or make zoning decisions regarding the nature of the tenancy. This came about years ago when communities like ours were trying to limit the amount of student housing, for instance, and human rights have said that that is not that's contrary to the human rights code. And so that's a consideration. I know I live in a district where it's a frustration, but it's a consideration we're not allowed to make. So I hope that clarifies for you. And the floor is yours again.
Do you have any further questions?
Yes, I think that's just, I understand that you can't, but the predominance would be for students, I would assume. And in other neighborhoods, I have sadly seen most of the single family homes disappear because they just, the infill became, there were just too many, how can I say this, a disparate number of single family homes over the housing needs of students. So I do understand what you're saying.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So are you planning to address the issue that I made about the size of the building adjacent to the property?
Absolutely. If you don't have any more questions, we'll turn to the planners to respond.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Keene.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Stone, for coming to the meeting tonight. I can tell you that in again, working on this design, we were very conscious of your property at 581. And a big part of the design feature was that separation distance, where the zoning, as I mentioned before, would allow that 1.2 meter distance. We're double that. And similarly, where the height would be allowed to be 10.7 meters, which is closer to 3 stories, we're coming in at 2 to respect staying below the street line of the front of the house on Union Street. So when I look at the orientation of your home at 581, and the fact that your driveway is on the west side of your property between your home and 585 and has the parking at the rear, and we have a 2-story building, and we have site plan control and landscape features and fencing proposed, I don't believe there will be a negative impact from a privacy perspective should you move into this home, or should you have tenants or do a project similar to what my clients are doing. And a lot of that has to do with what you brought up as well, that these, particularly these Union Street properties, they're very large and deep, and there is room to come up with unique concepts such as the one we're doing for your neighbor. And you would have similar rights to go through a process like this. So it's not a case that you can everyone could just build. These are individual cases assessed. And so I just wanted to assure you that in coming up with the designs, we have considered your property. And if there are design elements that you'd like to see involved, we'd certainly be happy to get those in writing through the clerk or the planning department. And those are things we could take into consideration as this advances forward with staff and committee and other questions. Right now, we've just received technical comments from city staff, and the way these projects go, there's always a couple of changes. So we'd be pleased to take your input. but do know that we absolutely considered your property and the orientation of the home and your driveway in coming up with the design that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just heard from Elizabeth and James that we have a couple more people that have raised their hand. So we're totally going contrary to our usual protocol. We will hear those two, and then we'll close off the meeting. Okay, so if you can hook them up, Elizabeth, we're good to go.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe Ms. Morissette has been unmuted.
Yes, she has. The floor
Hi
is
there.
yours, Ms. Morissette.
Hi, I just want to express the same concern that David and Catherine Stone have, that you've got a large
Sorry,
property.
Ms. Morissette, if you could please let us know your address as well. Thank you.
Oh, I live at 3 Gardner Street, but I own the house across the street from the reference property. I own 586 Union Street. And our concern is that I did send an email when we purchased 586 Union Street. We did so with the plan on improving the home and retiring there. And 3 Gardner Street came on the market, and we loved the property, so we purchased it. And what we kept hearing from people with 586 Union was, do an addition, you'll make lots of money, it can be a rental. And it is so disheartening and so discouraging that so many neighborhoods in Kingston are going that route. And if you allow a large addition in the back at 585, 581 is suddenly in their backyard going to be looking at this large building. And do you know what 581 is going to do? They're going to sell to somebody who's going to do an addition. And then there's this whole tumble effect. And I understand we need housing for students and for the general population, and we need intensification. But if you drive down Union and make a left on Gardner Street, there is lots of intensification. Why do we have to do it to every street, every neighborhood? Portsmouth already has a lot of mixed residences. We're losing the single family dwelling feel to it, and it is a historical community in the area, and it's saddening and disheartening to see what is going on. That's my issue.
Thank you very much. And Elizabeth, and all of the questions will be answered by the planners after we've had all the questions put in. So I believe I see Paul and Kate are unmuted. If you could identify yourself with an address.
Hi, Councillor Neal. This is Paul and Kate Lawler. We live at 15 Kennedy Street. We know some of the councillors here very well. And if you look at that map, how are you, Mr. Hill? Do you have the map in front of you there for the planning map?
No, but
does anyone have it there? To see how deep
I can
these
look it up
lots
in
are?
my hard copy. Is there a way, Elizabeth, of putting it on the screen?
This is the first time I've ever done this. Can you guys see me?
No.
All right. Well, I did send a letter. Does anybody see it or read it? Awesome. This is not about not wanting people to have a home to live in. If you see this property, I mean, all of the lots, there's 3 of them side by each, you're going to see exactly the same 2-story buildings there within a couple of years. These are money generating properties. And the lots are huge, they're unique. Portsmouth Village is unique. The reason I'm concerned is because I live here. I don't live out on Sydenham Road, I live here. Live right down where these properties are being developed. Gardner Street, just at the end of our street at Kennedy and Gardner, a property, it's basically a 2-story apartment building. They're adding more to it right now. It was approved, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Those are the kind of buildings you're going to see in Portsmouth Village. And I think someone needs to come down and take a look at this property. Like whoever wants to see a tree in the front yard, well, that tree is going to be growing on Union Street. There is no front yard. It's right on the road. So my concern is the neighborhood is changing. It really is. And it's like, I know that you're not going to dictate who rents a property. These are Queens and St. Lawrence students that are going to be living here. And I mean, they have to be somewhere, right? But it's like, this is, if you come down to this neighborhood and see what's happening, it sounds like this project's already a done deal. Is it? Is this project a done deal?
No, this is the first of a process. Our staff take back the public comments, and in likely a couple of months, a comprehensive report comes with a recommendation, and the recommendation may be to approve, it may be to change or approve with conditions, or it may be to turn it down. But this is merely the public meeting at the beginning of that process.
Okay. Well, you're going to see this type of project take place twice more right beside the one that's being proposed. There'll be two more, because these are going to be extremely profitable. And yeah, somebody may live there now. I guarantee you they won't for long. They'll be living out somewhere in the country, and these will be rental properties. And it's unsettling. It really is.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth and James, are those the last of our public?
Mr. Chair, I do not see any hands at this time. Is there, if there's anyone else who would like to speak, if they could raise their hand? And I do not see any, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Mr. Keene to address those comments.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you to those members and neighbors that have taken the time to come to the meeting tonight. I didn't hear further questions. What I heard was more comments, and I do appreciate the comments that have been provided this evening. And it's I don't know that it's something I can address as an answer, other than to note again to this committee how carefully we have tried to design this project so that a multi-unit house is an appropriate one at this location. And we'll continue to work with staff in this committee to make changes if they are seen to be fit. So again, thank you for the chance to speak this evening.
Thank you. I'll give one more really quick question to committee because we've heard some other things. Is there any comment or question that the committee would like to make? Seeing none, I'll declare this public meeting completed, and all of those that have sent letters or spoken tonight will be given a notification from the city for when the comprehensive report with recommendations are coming forward. So I'll declare the public meeting completed, and we'll now turn to Planning Committee meeting number 04-2021. And I'll call the meeting to order, and I'm going to turn to the Vice Chair for the approval of the agenda because I want to make a motion concerning the agenda.
Sure. So we'll look for a mover. This is an approval of the agenda with addeds. Councillor Osanik, seconded by Councillor Hill. All those in favor?
Oh, if I can just speak to
Sure.
why.
You want to go do this now? You want to make an amendment?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to add under other business, an opportunity to discuss for information purposes only, and I'll explain that more clearly when we get there, how we went about making the decision that has been reversed, thankfully, but the decision not to send out notifications to the neighborhood. So I think the clerks probably can make sense out of what I just said, and we'll speak to it when we get to other business.
Right. So we're looking for a slight amendment to the agenda under new business to talk about procedure around public communication. Moved by Councillor Neal. Do we need a seconder for this? Can we have
I don't believe so,
No?
but if I don't believe so, but clerks can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, we do not need a motion to include this. It would just be as part of the approval of the agenda overall.
Sure. Okay, so we'll just approve the agenda overall as amended, and also with the addeds. So did we have a mover? Was it Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Hill? All in favor? And that passes, and I'll hand the chair back to Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. Confirmation of minutes. Do we have any minutes to confirm?
No, Mr. Chair, not at this time. The
Okay.
minutes from last meeting and this meeting will be approved at the next meeting in February.
Thank you very much. Disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have no delegations. We have no briefings. I will read the very short business statement, and then we'll get right into our single application. The portion of this meeting is open to the public. The city has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we're now looking again at Union Street. It's 192 Union Street, and it's the IBI group, and the recommendation and proposal is before us. Who would like to make this presentation?
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Hello.
I'll be making this presentation.
Thank you.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. This is a comprehensive report that I will be presenting on. It's regarding a zoning bylaw amendment for zoning bylaw 8499. And the subject site is located at 192 Union Street. One thing to mention here before the start of the presentation is that the application went to a public meeting back in November of 2020. Next slide, please. The goal of this application is to allow for creating 4 self-contained residential units. One, as we speak, there are 2 units on the site, and what is being proposed that there will be an additional 2 units, one being in the basement, and the 4th one would be in an addition, which is the 3rd story. Next slide, please. So the subject site is located on the south side of Union Street. It's very close from the main campus of Queen's University. And it has a rectangular shape and a frontage of about 9 meters on Union Street. Vehicular access to the site is from the back lane, which is shown here on the slide. One thing to add is that the back lane is owned and maintained by Queen's University. Next slide, please. The photo shown of the building shows that the immediately adjacent 2 properties are a mix of 1.5 story and 2.5 stories, and they are built in a detached style. So there are no attached buildings close by. Next slide, please. The site plan shows that in the back of the property, there will be 2 standard parking spaces and 1 accessible type B parking space. Also shown is that there will be 4 bicycle parking spaces, and the bicycle parking spaces are going to be in an enclosed structure. Also, there will be amenity spaces, some on the back and some on the front. Additionally, as part of the proposal, 2 sidewalks, one on each side of the building, are proposed. And I hope you can see it. The sidewalks are going to be within the side yards. So the sidewalks are going to be within the side yards. Next slide, please. The perspective design shows that the proposal will kind of animate the existing buildings by adding more visual appeal. For example, Joliet balconies are proposed, and also contrasting colors are going to be utilized to make the building more vibrant and more visually interesting. Next slide, please. So the existing zone, which is an E special education and medical uses zone, does not allow the proposal. And for that reason, there was an application for a zoning bylaw amendment. And the target zone is a site-specific B600 zone, which includes 8 standards, which are shown here on the slide. And I'm going to pause here for about 30 seconds so you can read for yourselves what the new, which provisions of the zoning bylaw are being amended. Next slide, please. So we received comments regarding the proposal. These comments are shown on the slide here. In response to these comments, wood spindles in the back deck were replaced by black metal ones. Or additionally, we received comments confirming the ownership of the back lane. And as I mentioned before, it's owned by Queen's University. Other comments that are shown here were addressed in the report. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, I would like to mention that the proposed amendment was evaluated against all the applicable policies of the provincial policy statement and the official plan. And it is staff's view that the proposal is consistent with the provincial policies and confirms to the OP policies, and it represents a suitable use of the subject site. With that, I come to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
And if you could just comment on the public information that went out regarding this.
So you, Mr. Chair, when we say public information, are we talking about?
That it was, the neighbors were contacted regarding the public meeting and this meeting, and that those were fulfilled.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the public meeting and for the comprehensive report, all neighbors affected by the application were circulated on the application, and also there was a courtesy notice posted in the local newspaper, and as well as there was a sign that was posted on the site.
Great, thank you very much. I will first turn to the committee, and then we'll for any questions, and then we'll go to the public if there are any public questions or comments. So the floor is yours to the committee. Who would like to ask questions? And I apologize for my dog.
Mr. Chair, it's okay?
Yes, Councillor Hodges.
I was unmuted, but you hadn't said anything. I'd just like to see the second last slide again. That was shown by shown by the city planner. Now the one before that. There, okay. Okay, that's fine. I'm done. I just wanted to check it and just checking about what relative to what we saw before when it came for its public meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hill.
I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to ask this question, so I'll put this in the hands of the chair, but we did get a letter indicating that several years ago, a similar request for zoning change was made and turned down. I'm just wondering what the difference is between that and this, if anyone knows that.
Yes, that's if there is an answer, that's a legitimate question. Probably to our planner.
So you, Mr. Chair, and I can provide some context about the difference, but also the applicant can jump in and add more if he likes. So from my understanding, when I looked at the previous application, the biggest difference for me was about the lack of more visual interest to the building compared to the one we have at hand now. The one we have now has included more visual articulation, such as the Juliet balconies to the application, which was not the case in the previous one. That's what I remember about the main difference, but again, the applicant can add on to what I mentioned if he likes.
Yes, the applicant's planner is unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so about 10 years ago, there was an application shortly after the, I believe after the current owner bought it. And at the time it was thought that a rezoning would be a minor undertaking and they were just going to have a total of 2 units in the building. But then they decided to just withdraw because it was a bigger undertaking than they anticipated at the time. So they withdrew, and now I've decided to reapply and go and apply for 4 units. So there wasn't any particular reason at the time. It wasn't brought forward for a decision. I don't even believe it actually went through for a public meeting at the time. It was applied for and then withdrawn when it seemed like it was a bigger task than the owner originally anticipated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And this may be totally unrelated, but I know that all the adjoining properties, there was a question about ownership and easement to continue using the laneway. That's Queens. And I believe Queens have totally resolved that with all the adjoining properties. So that may or may not have been part of that issue. So any other members of the committee wish to speak? Seeing none, I'll turn it back to the clerks. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, I do not currently see any hands. However, I will remind members of the public if they wish to speak at this time, they will need to use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we will just give them a couple moments. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go back to the committee. Are there questions or comments from the committee that haven't yet been resolved? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hill has moved, seconded by Councillor Asanic. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So we will now go to motions, which we have none. Notices of motion, which we have none, and other business. And I'd just like to quickly make a couple of statements about other business. I had an opportunity, because this is an area that it doesn't routinely get utilized in an agenda. So I wanted to confirm some things, and I spoke to the clerks today regarding this.
Mr.
No
Chair, would you
motion.
like me to take the chair? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yes, I would.
I'll do that and acknowledge you. You have the floor.
Thank you for keeping me legal. I appreciate it. So no motions or additional items will be in order at this time. This should be for information only. The primary focus will be on questions regarding the process. Brief comments will be recognized by the chair, but only as they refer to or lead up to questions. I will remind both councillors and the public that as chair, I will be very aware of both our rules of order and our codes of conduct. So impugning motive or criticizing staff, specifically staff or councillors, will be immediately ruled out of order. And I appreciate our following those rules. And I will recognize any member of the committee or any attending councillor who's seeking information. And our staff will have an opportunity to respond to that. So any questions regarding that? Seeing none, I will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I will take over the chair. Is there anybody that wishes to speak to this issue? I know that there were some questions outstanding before. Yes, Councillor Hutchison. Then Councillor Kiley. Councillor Hutchison.
Okay, I was just waiting to be unmuted. My question is to staff is, we saw that there wasn't going to be notification within the 120 meters planning matters. I just wondered what the rationale for that was. I had in my follow-up email to Councillor Kiley, I said that. And so I'm just wondering what the reasoning was, and so we can better understand where it came from.
Yes, Ms. Agnew.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, happy to answer that question. So there are a few important things to consider. So when that decision was made and when I made that decision specifically, there's a couple of things I want to clarify. Number one, it was intended to be a temporary measure for a period of 4 weeks to cover the time that the provincial stay-at-home order was in effect. And the reason why I made that decision was that we were going back to the same protocol that we followed from April to September of 2020 when we had our staff working from home. Planning staff are not considered essential workers as per our regulations. And because of the stay-at-home order and given the direction of the province and what was happening with respect to COVID, I wanted to make sure that we provided every opportunity for our staff to be working from home. And there's a lot of manual work that goes into the preparation of the individual notices to go out to households. So all of those factors considered, as well as the support staff that we have within our group that provide the individual notices that go out to households, they also have vulnerable members that are living directly in their household. So I was taking into consideration all of those factors and looking at the provincial direction, and also recognizing that the decision, being a 4-week decision, was only going to impact 3 individual applications, and that under the Planning Act, we have the ability to meet or fulfill our regulations with respect to public notice in different ways. We don't have to do notices to that extent. That's a City of Kingston decision, but we could meet the legislation ably by being able to use a newspaper ad and also use the city website, which is what we did for 5 months in 2020. So when that decision came up at CMT, we were looking at all of the operational adjustments we needed to make in response to the stay-at-home order. And I was rolling back our operations to where we were back in the spring when there were stronger regulations in place.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Hutchison?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Please do.
Okay, so I can see all sides of this. So the production of the notice is an issue in and of itself. And does it mean that staff have to go into the office to produce them? And then I have a second question that falls after that. Are these notifications, I've been on council for who knows how long, and it just occurred to me when this happened, I don't know who delivers these things. So if you could answer that, and if it's Canada Post, why can't we do that? But obviously the production and the distribution are connected. So if you could explain that technical piece, please.
Sure, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The production of the notice, which includes the copying of what you see in terms of all the statutory information that talks about the nature of the application and all the language under the Planning Act, that plus the key map that goes along, that gets produced in-house by way of our printers. All of those have to be folded and stuffed into envelopes and also addressed with envelopes. And then once basically that takes place, the postage gets assigned and then it goes out in the mail for distribution by Canada Post is the process that we follow internally. So that process will continue. It's being done by other staff that are in the office working because they cannot work from home. So that is how that is being handled in the meantime, while my staff continue to be at home during the stay-at-home order.
Right. So we've done a workaround and figured out how to do it.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. I had a follow up. Just let me think for a second. Okay, so there's no problem. It came up in emails. So what I drew from what you said was that there's no problem with the Canada Post issue of delivering them is not an issue. It's all got to do with the production and distribution as it relates to the stay-at-home order.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I saw Vice Chair Kiley's hand up, and then we'll go to any members, any other members or councillors who wish to speak. Yes, Councillor Kiley.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you, thank you. Ms. Agnew, I think I had my information wrong when corresponding with other councillors and residents of this. I think you actually have corrected me, maybe unintentionally tonight, which is the distribution of the 120 meters radius. Is that an additional City of Kingston practice above and beyond what's required by the Planning Act? Because I was under the impression that was something that was a provincial mandate. So maybe you could clarify that for me.
Sure. The provincial legislation, it gives a couple of different ways that notice can be met under the Planning Act with respect to the official giving notice, as it's called. So you can use large newspaper ads, website distribution, or you can look at doing individual household notices with signage on the property. So the other consideration to this as well is that typically, again, in light of the stay-at-home order, when we do individual notices, there's also signage that has to be posted on the property. So in respect of having other people stay at home as well, we are thinking about both pieces and trying to satisfy it differently without people having to leave their homes for the period of 4 weeks during the order. But like I said, we figured out an alternative way to have the distribution done internally, and the individuals that have their applications going will have to post the signage on the property to meet the regulations, but those are being produced in-house as well.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that and for looking for a solution. I appreciate it and the work you do. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Hill's hand.
So thank you through you, Chair. What I heard that is that this was a practice, you entertained this practice because when the first emergency order came out, this is the practice that you followed. Is that correct? So,
yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Hill, we followed the same practice from April through to September because we had our staff working at home and John Counter Boulevard was closed to the public as it is now. So we're going back to the same operational procedure that we followed for a large part of 2020.
Did you have any complaints or concerns expressed to you at that time about this?
No, we didn't.
Okay. So really, you're just. I'm assuming you followed a practice. There was no concern expressed before. You didn't really see the potential for it to become a concern this time. Is that fair?
Thank you. Yeah, that would be fair.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one other attending counselor tonight. That's Councillor Chappelle. Did you have any questions regarding this? I guess seeing none, I will ask the vice chair to take the chair if he would.
I do, and I recognize you, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I really appreciate that you found a workaround and in order to address a number of complaints that we got primarily from the public, and I really appreciate that. I just want to make a couple of comments. One, I think we would all agree that the Whig isn't quite the newspaper it used to be. So I'm not sure we fulfill the intent by saying we won't need to send out notifications. Instead, we'll publish in the Whig as we always do. So that's an issue. And I've mentioned this before in other conversations. In constitutional law, there's a thing called customs and usage. We get used to something that may not be a required process, but it gets done constantly and it becomes an expectation. And I think the 120 meter notification, as far as planning goes, is that kind of customs and usage that takes place. I really, really appreciate, and I don't feel that any blame is due to anybody other than, I will say, would have been helpful if council was informed of this decision prior to us getting a plethora of complaints from the public regarding it. That would have been helpful. But having said that, I believe you've done everything that you should have. You called a pause given the situation with the emergency declaration, and you found a way to work around that through our very adept staff. And so I appreciate all that you've done to correct this. And thank you very much. So.
Great, and the chair is back to you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Hutchison.
I was trying to get out of the way of the other councillors before, so I didn't finish. So I just wanted to say thank you to the commissioner for her trying to protect her staff. I think we all really appreciate that and understand her motivation. And it's impossible to complain about that for sure. This is a bit difficult. I'm just going to say that I appreciate how the public responded as well. However inadvertent or misread the whole thing was, because we saw it tonight in a smaller way than sometimes it's been, is that people want to get those notices to be sure that they know what's going on in their neighborhoods, because we've looked at the effects of densification through studentification. And I can tell you it's alive in my district, in Councillor Neal's and Councillor Stroud's in a big way. And the commissioner knows this, but that wasn't part of her decision for the reason she gave. And that's why we got the type of complaints we got today. And so I'm just saying this for the benefit of the more westerly councillors. This is a serious problem that's been going on for the whole time I've been on council, and we haven't got a solution yet. So I understand why people became adamant. As Councillor Neal said very well, it's a matter of expectation. So I just want to make that note so we're aware of why we got the response we did. But again, thank you to the commissioner. I think she was doing her very best to protect her staff, and that's can be only be good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchison. I appreciate those comments. So are there any, Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public? I don't see any, but are there any?
Mr. Chair, we do have 2 members of the public still present. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay. If any members of the public would like to raise a hand to make a comment, you just have to go to the Zoom below and hit the participants button, and you can request, you can raise your hand.
There are no further hands, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now declare the other business as completed, and we'll go to correspondence. We've received a letter, one letter, which is part of our correspondence. And any comments on it? Seeing none, we'll go to the date and time of our next meeting, which is Thursday, February 4th at 6 p.m. And I understand it may be another somewhat light agenda. Hope springs eternal, I know. I appreciate that. So we will call for an adjournment. I will recognize Councillor Hutchison and Councillor Osanek. Councillor Hill is usually the first one to shoot up his hand, but not tonight, I guess. So all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.